Dying to a camper, especially in a Battle Royale game mode, just sucks. So let's go over some ways to help avoid that. Alright, so in my previous video about camping in Battlefield 5's Firestorm, I promised to give some tips and tricks on avoiding dying to campers. So that's what we're going to do today. On the screen right now should be a couple of timestamps for different topics that we'll cover today. I'll also put those in the description for you. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is map positioning. I generally follow one of two different techniques when I'm playing Firestorm. The first is to follow the edge of the circle, and the second is to just rush straight to the center. Now the reason I like to go straight to the center is because it gives you a good chance to have a good foothold. There's not as many people in the grand scheme of things. You probably will have a quick fight, as you saw two other people just landed in this place. But if you're able to kill them, then you will have your loot and you'll have your good foothold, and if you die, it's really not that big a deal because you didn't waste as much time as you would have with a longer game where you spent more time looting. In addition to that, any combat that you do have this early in the game would be closer to an even playing field. These people have had the same amount of time as you to loot, and while they may have gotten lucky, you're not running into some people at the edges of the zone that have been looting for the last 15 minutes. Another thing I've noticed by using this technique is that by the time you get to the end of the game, if you've been winning your fights towards the center of the zone, the players that are left over are a lot of campers or players who have been playing on the outside of the zone. It's not always true, but it's a large majority of them. Now, I've noticed that a lot of these players are just not as good as the people who would rather take one-on-one fights. So, if you can manage to win your fights early on, by the end of the game, you'll probably have a lot less stronger players to go against. So that brings us to our next topic, map awareness. Now, there's a lot that goes on with map awareness, mostly small things, but they make a huge difference on whether or not you will end up dying to a camper or not. And map awareness has two major categories, the first being out in the open, and the second being in landmarks or in looting areas. When you're out in the open, you want to make sure that there's the least amount of line of sight towards you as possible. If you can get up against hills or cliffs, that's probably a good idea, but you still want to make sure you have an escape route. In towns or in looting areas, this gets a lot more complicated. You want to be able to make sure that when you're going into a town, you're aware of whether or not somebody else has been there or is still currently there. As a quick aside before I get into that and the details for it, when you're looting, you want to make sure that you're not standing still when you're looting. I'm doing a really terrible job of that right now, but usually when you're looting, you want to be spamming AD so that you don't get shot, or at least if somebody does shoot at you, there's a higher chance of them missing their first shots. Campers generally don't have the best aim. So the first thing that you want to look for when you're going into a town like this is that you want to see if it's been looted. If it has been looted, there's a chance that somebody is still there. It's not necessarily always the case, but campers like buildings. When you go into structures like this that don't have doors or other indicators that it's been looted, you want to check your corners. This is something that you probably should be doing anyway. Now notice that I found a building with a broken window and subsequently a closed door. This is immediately suspicious. There could be somebody still in this building because they did not use a door to exit. However, they could have always just used the same window to exit. So you want to peek by jumping around the windows, and when you open the door, you open it from an angle, give it a moment before going in. This is an attempt to try to bait them into giving themselves away. Now, there is something unique to Battlefield that other Battle Royales would not have. That is destructible environments and lots of explosives. So if you happen to know that there's somebody camping inside of a building, blow it up. One little tip though with these flares for V1s and airstrikes is that you want to put it on the roof. There's two reasons for that. One is if they don't see the flare, they won't likely run from it. And two, if the explosions do destroy the building, that then falls on the player and does additional damage. Thus, more likely to kill your camper. There is, however, one major downside to making a lot of noise with something like an explosion, or even any other combat that you might have, and that is that you will get third-partied. Campers, or even just other players that were in the area, will hear your fight or your explosions and come running. It's an easy target, and they think they can get away with it. And most of the time, they are right. There's the temptation of loot, and with Battlefield's current system, it can take a while to sort through, but it is very likely that somebody is nearby, and probably not a good idea to go right for it. Ideally, you would go hide somewhere and heal up. Now that sounds a lot like camping, but it's better than the alternative of turning around and getting shot while you have half your health and you're still trying to loot. Now the next topic I want to go over is bunkers and capture points. These are just magnets for campers because there's just too many people that know that you could be there. With bunkers, it goes both ways. If you're inside the bunker and anybody nearby heard you opening it, they'll keep camping outside. Otherwise, if you find a bunker, there could definitely be somebody inside already. With capture points, it can be even worse, as anybody on the map can see that you're capturing that point, and it's very likely that there are players on the outside waiting for that person to capture the point and then kill them. Due to those facts, it is of my opinion that if you want to avoid dying to a camper, you should probably just avoid both of these locations. They can be fun and they add a different unique aspect to the game, but they will attract campers. Now the last thing I'd like to talk about is something that's really simple but that I don't see enough of in any game. It's that people should be using the flare guns. They're a little uncommon, but they work exactly like they do in multiplayer, and it's that you shoot them into the air and they will spot players for you. Now in other previous Battlefields, you could do 3D spotting. This is still available in Battlefield 5, however you have to use flare guns or other suppression methods. Anyway, I think that's it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching, and thanks for everybody who subscribed in the last video. I've updated the header on my channel to say that there will be new gaming content every Friday at 5 p.m., and that is the schedule I think I'm going to try to stick to from here on out. Next week, I'm looking at doing a video on World War Z, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll be able to see it when it comes out next week. Thanks for watching.